Okay, good morning. When I went to grade Scarlet Ibis writing tasks, I decided to put that off until we get some of these things taken care of. So I'm making a video on fixes to common minor errors that I'm still seeing in some of your writing. And so one of the things that I'm going to ask you to do is kind of keep a list or take some notes somewhere, and then highlight or circle the things that you will need to go back and fix in your writing. Obviously, this isn't specific to everybody, but I'm seeing too many of these common errors to be able to assess your writing just yet. So this week you'll be going back to choose one of your strongest DEJs and one of your strongest 1-2s from both the Most Dangerous Game and the Scarlet Ibis, and you'll be resubmitting those with hopefully none of these common errors in your work. Not going to be the most thrilling topic today, sorry about that, but I have 7 things to get through, and I'll do my best to get through these quickly and efficiently. Okay, the first one is perfect MLA is required. That's an expectation that you can meet by watching this MLA formatting video that I try to remember to attach to each assignment. And if I ever don't, you feel free to access it under the video library post on Classroom, or I usually post it on writing tasks. So you can just scroll back to an earlier one and access it that way and follow the steps exactly. One of the ones that is missed often is this up here. And I think it's important to note that, well, this student did it perfectly. I didn't have to fix this one or anything. Some students are still tabbing over and then writing their last name here, but your page number shouldn't appear in the text. It should appear in your header. And again, how you do that is you actually just go to Insert, head down to Page Numbers, and then go to this 1-2, and then it's going to add a 1 here, and it's going to add a 2 if you had a second page. And then you would just click before the 1 and then type your last name there. And then lastly, since Google defaults to times or Arial 11, you'd need to change it to 12 and then Times New Roman. And then it looks like in the headers, most students are doing this correctly, but little things like the date, so you'd want to put the digit here, 21, no first, nothing like that. Then the full month spelled out, and then the full year spelled out, so 2020. All right. Let's also talk about first person. So first person in your writing includes anything like I, me, we, or I as a reader, or phrases like in my opinion or I think that. That's all first person. And since your name is attached to this piece of writing, your reader already knows that it's you writing and they know it's your opinion. So you don't need to include phrases like I think or I believe, since it's already implied that the whole piece of writing is your opinion, basically. So definitely keep those out of your writing. It can be tough, especially when you are working with phrases like we think that, or when you're trying to talk about the effect of a text on the reader. So I'm going to point out a student who did this really, really well. So this is one of her DEJs. Doodle's brother claims it was bad enough having an invalid brother, but having one who possibly was not all there was unbearable. Sorry, I missed it. There we go. So I began to make plans to kill him by smothering him with a pillow. First one. When Doodle's brother speaks about how useless and invalid his brother is, it gives the reader the opportunity to make an assumption about his character. So instead of saying us, it gives us the opportunity to make an assumption about this character. This student put the reader because that keeps it in third person without using first person. Very nicely done. All right, so definitely keep those I, me's, and we's out of your writing. It's already assumed that it's your opinion. All right. The next one I want to talk about is titles. both titles that you're mentioning, like Of Mice and Men or Scarlet Ibis, and the title of your work. So first, let's talk about titles of a work somebody else wrote. If you're quoting from a short story or something short, anything that appears in a bigger work, like a poem or a short story, then use the little quotation marks to note that. So, for example, the Scarlet Ibis would be placed in quotation marks. It's a proper way to note that title in MLA format, since it's a small work. But Of Mice and Men is italicized because it was published on its own. If you're quoting a poem, same thing. Much Madness is Divine Ascents is a small work, and it's published within a bigger work, within a textbook or online. If you're quoting a full-length text, it's not cited within a bigger work, that's just a standalone text, then it would be in italics. And then as far as your titles for your writing tasks, I'm seeing a lot of students title their work just like if they're writing the Scarlet Ibis writing task, title their work just with the Scarlet Ibis. That's not going to work since somebody already came around and wrote the Scarlet Ibis. So if you put this title on your work, it's like saying, no, I wrote the Scarlet Ibis and James Hurst wrote it. So you're going to need to add to the title or even just not include the word Scarlet Ibis at all. So one easy way to fix this is you can just put the Scarlet Ibis writing task, right? Then it's implying that you're writing about the story and not that you're just copy and pasting the full story into your document. Or you can put Scarlet Ibis analysis or something like that. Just make sure that it's something different than just the actual title. This student who wrote this excellent work here did that well, right? She put the Scarlet Ibis writing task. The only thing is, make sure that you note your title and either needs to go in quotes or italics, and since the Scarlet Ibis is a short story, it'd be in quotes. So Scarlet Ibis writing task is the only change that I would make there. All right. Next one, I want to talk about evidence. So your evidence sentence. And just a review, for a DEJ, your evidence is this, the first sentence, right? Double entry journal is a quote and 2 sentences of analysis. So if you're writing a DEJ, your evidence is your first sentence. If you're writing a 1-2, your evidence is your second sentence because you add a claim. And I've got an example here to kind of review that too. So this student wrote, she labeled her literary device and then, which is not necessary, so you don't have to do that. So I'm going to take that off just to be more clear. This student wrote a DEJ, and then she also wrote a second DEJ, and then she has her 1-2 here down at the bottom. Actually, let's do that. There we go. Okay. Doodle's older brother says he seemed all head with a tiny body which was red and shriveled like an old man's. Hurst 1. Okay, so when you are quoting something, just like this student did, you need that signal phrase. This is a signal phrase, and it signals to the reader that there's a quote coming. If this were not here, and it just jumped right into the quote, that'd be called a quote bomb, meaning you haven't taken the time to actually introduce your quote, and you're just dropping it right into your paper. So let's see what other signal phrases this student used. So the first one she uses is Doodle's older brother says, and it's introducing who's speaking, so the character speaking here. And the next one also introduces the character speaking as well. Doodle's brother claims, and then she jumps right into the quote that she used. Oops. There we go. And then the last one, Hurst writes. So this one is different because she's noting that the author is writing here instead of noting the character speaking. And that's fine. Either one is fine. A signal phrase, you just want to note who is speaking or who is writing. And as long as you cover one of those with your signal phrases, you're good to go. Okay. Whoops. There we go. Let's talk about the citing. So I still have students who are citing by who's talking. You do not need to know that. So this is not going to say Doodle's brother at the end of the citation. It's just going to say Hurst space 1. Since it was written by James Hurst and it's on page 1. Make sure there's a space between your author's last name and the page number here. And that's all you would need to do. Okay. Let's talk punctuation briefly, and then I want to get into what to do when there's a quote within a quote. So this student did this exactly correctly. This is why I chose the student's work. Let's go down to the 1-2 she wrote. Hurst uses the scarlet ibis to foreshadow Doodle's death. Hurst writes, I lay there crying, sheltering my fallen scarlet ibis from the heresy of the rain. Okay. Notice how this student has the quote right here after her signal phrase, and then the citation, and then the punctuation, this tiny little period right here. That is exactly correct. So your punctuation should come at the end of your sentence, because your sentence starts here and your sentence ends here. Your sentence does not end here. Your sentence ends after the citation, and your sentence begins at the signal phrase. So since you're weaving your quote that you chose into your sentence, not the author's sentence, it's not their sentence anymore, it's yours, your punctuation would just go at the end. A lot of you guys are putting it here, or you are putting it after your quotation marks. I'm going to go after the citation. And then similarly, if you have punctuation that comes after your signal phrase, make sure there's no extra space. Same with quotation marks. Make sure there's no extra space between the quotation marks and where the quote starts. It's just quote and then begin the quote that you're citing here. Okay. Switch that back briefly. Last couple things here. I also wanted to briefly go through quotes within quotes. So for this example, I'm going to pull up Of Mice and Men. This is from the 4th page. That's good, he said. You drink some, George. You take a good big drink. He smiled happily. All right, so let's say I want to discuss this quote. I'm going to hit Control-C. Just going to copy my work over, add to the sample here. Notice how when I went down here to the 2nd page, the Google Docs automatically gave me a page 2 here, but it didn't automatically add my last name, so I would need to go back and do that, and then it looks like it reverted back to Arial 11, so I'm going to change that. There we go. Okay, so here's the quote that I want to talk about. So I can either introduce, for my signal phrase, I can introduce the character or the author speaking, and I think I wanted to say Lenny says, that's good, he said. You drink some, George, you take a good old drink. Okay. So it looks like I have a quote within a quote right here, right? I'm quoting this full thing of text, and it's coming from page 4, so Steinbeck 4. And it looks like I have a quote within a quote. So instead of just double quoting it, like putting a space and then doing that, I'm actually going to use small quotes within the bigger quotes. So start with the big quotes and then go back into the small quotes and then end with the bigger quotes. So in this particular one, I would need, this one is the small quote. Again, it's quote within the quote, so I need to change these first to smaller quotes, since it's Lenny's talking within Steinbeck's quotation here, and then go back to the beginning and the end, the very beginning and the end, and add the bigger ones. That's good, he said. You drink some, George. You take a good big drink. He smiled happily. Steinbeck 4. So then that's absolutely correct. Your little quotes are within the bigger quotes, and then it ends with the big quotation marks. All right. EJ versus 1-2 format. You guys are doing a lot better with this, with understanding the difference and using the difference between these two. But I'll briefly cover that as well. This student did it exactly correct. So her first DEJ She's got the signal phrase. Then she has her evidence. I'm going to highlight these things, color code them. And then she's got her analysis. 2 sentences of analysis on the effect of the quote on the reader, plot, character, or world. Right? This quote is significant to the character because Doodle's disability is an important piece in their lives. Second one, she's got her signal phrase. Perfect. She's got a quote, which I'll highlight in green again. And then a couple sentences of analysis here, so exactly right. And then the last one, it looks like, is her 1-2. So here's the difference. Look, her signal phrase is coming at the second sentence. Then she's got her quote, and then analysis. So let's compare the two. Here's your 1-2 at the bottom. Here's your DEJs at the top. The difference is this first sentence, which is called a claim. So a 1-2 is your claim, evidence, and then 2 sentences of analysis. And then your DEJ is just evidence, and then 2 sentences of analysis. The reason it's called a 1-2 again is because the ratio is 1-2. 1 sentence of evidence to 2 sentences of analysis. But in a 1-2 paragraph chunk, it's always assumed that you have this claim to start with. The reason is a 1-2 is a great format to use, and we'll get into 2-4s and 3-6s later, so when you're using like more evidence. A 1-2 is a great format to use when you have a question that you're responding to. So notice how this student answered the question here. Hurst uses the scarlet ibis, or the question asks about symbol. So I would add uses the symbol of the scarlet ibis to foreshadow Doodle's death, which contains her opinion, right? Her opinion is that he uses it to foreshadow Doodle's death. And then it contains the response to the question. But with DEJs, there's no question. It's just, here's a quote I liked and here's why it's significant to the text. So that's kind of the difference between the two. Okay, now that I made her document look like a rainbow, let's get into the last couple things. Works cited page. So this is a super picky formatting thing, but again, it's very important that we have this correct so we can move on in our writing. So let's say that I'm creating a works cited page for Scarlet Ibis, and I'm given the citation. I'm going to try to give you guys the citation when it's more difficult to obtain. And this one was a little more difficult to obtain just because I got it in a textbook that you guys don't own. So I just created the citation for you. Don't copy this part. Just start. The first thing in a citation should always just be the author's last name. So I'm going to start my copy and paste from the author's last name. I'm going to hit Control-C. And then I'm going to hit Control-V. Take the highlighting off here. Okay. All right, so I'm going to hit the center button and then hit Works Cited. And I also have a separate video on how to format this too, which you can always access, and I'll post that. I'll post that in future assignments as well. So if I'm creating a full new page, it looks like it's going down on this next page, but if I want to automatically do that, I'm just going to hit Insert, Page Break, and then go to that, and then it's going to send it down to the very top of this page, and it won't move it. So even if I start typing or if my text gets longer, it's going to always send it down to a completely new page, and that's what you want. So don't have your works cited entry at the end of your text, have it on a completely new page after you finish writing. Notice how this doesn't have any extra information, doesn't have a colon, doesn't have bolded or anything. Some of you guys are bolding your titles or making it really big. Just needs to be times 12, times your room 12. And then this needs to be left aligned, and the title needs to be center aligned. Okay. If you have 2 lines of text in your works cited entry, the second one here needs to be indented, which creates some problems. If you just take your cursor and then hit tab, it's going to act like, oh, don't you want to tab the first line? No, I want to tab the second line. So it's just not going to work. As many times as I try, it's not going to work if I do that. So one fix that you can do that I found that sometimes works, that's kind of the cheat way of doing it, is you can put your cursor under here and you can hit enter a couple times, and then you can pull it back up and then you can just hit tab, and that will work for you. Or if you want to do it the fancy way, you can play around with these, some people call them carrots, I guess. So you can play around with this where you are dragging this here, and then the top one should actually be here, so that means that you're, nope, there we go. So that your indentation is automatically created. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to go through. Aside from how you're graded on these, so I will get back to you with a Scarlet Ibis writing task score when we've kind of fixed for these smaller errors. I know it's a lot, but I'm definitely want to make sure they're out of your writing so that I can assign some higher scores. And when you get your score back, just remember that the scale, and I'll put the rubric up there too, but the scale of 4 means you've gone above and beyond expectations. A 3 is still pretty much an A. It's meeting expectations. So, like the one that I just used as a sample, it's probably a 3. It's meeting expectations. Everything looks good. There's nothing added. There's nothing taken away. The student cited correctly. She has a claim with her 1-2, etc. So I'd assign that to as a 3. If it's a 4, it means you're exceeding expectations. It means you've gone above and beyond. So if a student's going above and beyond, that means there might be a full extra DEJ in there, or their analysis might just be incredibly well developed or incredibly good, or their quote choices might just be the 3 best quotes from the whole story or something like that. So that's exceeding expectations. 3 is meeting. 2 is not quite. Whoops. There we go. Standard yet not yet met, but almost. 1 is just not yet met. So 1 might look like, missing citations, DEJ format isn't followed, nothing's in MLA format, that kind of thing. And then a 0 is just maybe there's no quotes or not finished or something like that. A 0 is typically like no attempt. So if you are receiving a 2, it just means that you missed some things, but that you're almost there. If you're receiving a 3, it doesn't mean you did anything wrong. It just means you're meeting expectations. And if you're receiving a 4, it means you went above and beyond, and that your work exceeded expectations. And remember, my grading scale is a little bit different. Check my syllabus for that, because you'll notice that like a 2 doesn't equal an F. It doesn't not equal an F. Go into my grading scale and my syllabus and check that out, because a 2 means you're almost there. It doesn't equal an F in the gradebook. And a 3 doesn't just automatically equal a C in the gradebook. So go check that out if you're curious. There's no reason you should be ashamed or embarrassed about receiving a 3. That means you're exactly where you should be. All right, thank you very much for listening, and I'll have a few follow-ups and a reflection that you guys can fill out to start working on catching these errors and revising for them in your work. Thanks so much.